if I just don't work anymore and I move to one of these territorial tax countries that the nomad capitalist is talking about, then I probably don't need to work anymore. And it's just kind of like worked out in the back of my napkin what it was currently sitting at, and what I would need to live. And so, that's kind of what I did. I had to get out of the New Zealand tax net because I was still just in that, and then I had to get out of the Australian tax net, and then once that was done, then I could start selling some of the crypto and sort of funding my life.
You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to start enjoying your life. You can do that much earlier and start living a life that you love and that's true to you. Welcome to Freedom Before FI. Using FIRE and life design techniques, we help you create freedom on your way to FI instead of waiting until you're retired to do the things that light you up. I'm your host Greg, a FIRE movement and life design enthusiast. If you're itching to get freedom now, then let's do this. All right, Andy, welcome to the show. A warm welcome. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for stopping by. Just to begin, Andy, just for the listeners, do you mind giving them a quick 60-second intro about yourself?
60 seconds is a bit much, probably don't need that much. But my name's Andy, I'm a Kiwi. I was very lucky. I managed to retire at 35 when I was working in Australia, kind of during COVID times, to be honest. And I was very lucky in respect that I worked out that if I stopped working and moved to a low tax or no tax country with the assets that I had, I could essentially retire right now, and using something called geoarbitrage, or geofire as I've coined it now, I could essentially not pay tax legally and retire. I think I worked it out to be about 14 and a half years earlier than if I had stayed working in Australia for a bank, having to pay 40% or whatever the case may be. And then sort of since then I've spent about 3 to 4 months a year hiking in Europe, and I based myself out of Panama. We're in the process of moving to Spain, which is pretty exciting. I've written my first book, which I think we're going to probably talk about. I'm in the process of writing another 2 books, which are happening. And I also trade options, which is a nice little bonus and a means of generating regular income for me, which has been really fun. And just trying to collect as many cool little adventures along the way as I can, really, on my way to hopefully what is a very long life. Like paragliding on the weekend was very cool. But that's kind of me. I've got a partner, and my Spanish is all right now. It's pretty good now. Starting to learn French, just trying to fill in the time, Yeah, retire at 35, you kind of sit down and give yourself a bit of a talking to after a year, and you say, well, if this is what life's going to be like for the next 50 years, I better do some stuff, Otherwise, life's going to get real boring. I'll probably end up going back to work. So, anyway, that's kind of where my mindset's at, and where I came from, and what I get up to.
Amazing, that's really awesome. So, how is the sort of the FI life right now? And how many years have you been sort of FI for now?
It's 4. I finished in 20. Sorry, I stopped working full time in 2021. So February 2021, bang on COVID times, and moved to Panama there. So life's been a bit of a kind of like an onion, to use a Shrek analogy. Like the person that I am now is a very different person to the me that retired. I'm much more of a routine orientated dude now. I try to get to bed early. So it's so funny. Like, I've got no restrictions on myself except for the ones that I put on myself, and I probably live more of a balanced life now with my own self-imposed routine than I did when I was working and I had to go and be in the office at 8 o'clock. So, but life is good, like between sort of writing, I've started doing in 2022, I started a degree part-time, just again to sort of keep my brain going, and stay interested in what was going on. And I'm into I do these random fitness things every year. Last year I decided to run a marathon, but hated running, so decided I'll pick a really pretty place to do a real dumb activity, like run 42.5 kilometers. So we booked it for Florence, and we went to Italy and liked it. So we stayed a couple of months in Italy, and I got fat after the marathon. So there's plenty of things that keep you occupied and stuff like that.
Awesome. But that's interesting that you said you're more structured now than when you were working. Why is that, do you think?
I think I'm a little bit. So I was sort of disclaimer. I was in the army, and so like routine is really is my wheelhouse. I like that, but also I've developed over the last 4 years. The first year was like a honeymoon. I went hiking for 6 months. I just went crazy, and because COVID, and I know some people probably have different feelings on this, but for me, COVID was the best time. And the reason that I say that is because I had a New Zealand passport and couldn't go home to New Zealand because they locked everybody down. But because I was from New Zealand and I had been vaccinated, I flew to the US and I managed to get vaccinated. So I was a vaccinated Kiwi, so we don't really offend anybody. We're not on anybody's radar or anything like that. And I was vaccinated. Oh, thumbs up. I just ended up like traveling through Europe, hiking all around the place. And because no one else was doing it, you got cheap Airbnb. There was no lines for tourist attractions. Restaurants were cheap. Train travel was cheap. Everything was amazing. Again, there was chaos and there was badness in the world for sure. But from a travel perspective, it was incredible. Planes where, whole sections of economy wouldn't book out, so you could literally just lay across all 4 seats. Like, you had a lay flat bed, and just brilliant. But yeah, I think after that year, that's when I had that sort of verbal slapping sort of come to myself and be like, right, I cannot keep eating and drinking and hiking for the next 50 years if I want to live a good sort of healthy life. So I read a couple of like really good books on just sort of balance and happiness and physical well-being and stuff like that. And so I decided I was going to start getting into things that engaged my brain. And so that's why the following year I got into university and started doing the degree, and then I started adding in more physical, because I was training and I was hiking. I was relatively fit, but I wanted to really sort of push myself, so I was moving towards some goals. And so as I started bolting on more of these things, mind, wellness, physical activity, learning languages and stuff, that's when the sort of routine element came back, and it'd be like, right, Mondays is for this particular subject, Tuesdays is for this, every morning we're going to do language lessons and we're going to meditate, we're going to read some philosophy and all sorts of stuff. And before I knew it, I have 5 things every morning now that I do before I do anything else. So that becomes like the building block for my day. And so my girlfriend knows that if she comes in here and I'm reading, just give me 5 or 10 minutes just to get my sort of mental house in order, and then we sort of box on with the day. So, but I found that that routine, one, it helps me to sort of it helps me to sort of clear my mind. We have this little saying where if I'm feeling a bit like a snow globe, it's because I haven't got my routine and there's too much stuff like buzzing around. I need to get back into my routine and focus, and we need to start reading, and I need to meditate, all of these sorts of things. So if I start snow globing out, then we need to get back to this routine. And I've just found that this little block of activities every day sets me up for a really productive sort of session. And because I get so much productivity out of that, it kind of becomes a self-licking ice cream, where because it works so well, I just want to do it all the time. And I think that's where a lot of the the outputs come, the articles that I write and the books and all that sort of stuff. It comes from starting off with this routine.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I remember when I was on sabbatical, and I love these little morning routines, like whether it's exercise, meditation, reading. Usually for me, it's like exercise and maybe a bit of work. Yeah, that just sets you up for the day. Sort of, you feel like you could do quite a lot during the day.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. You can look back on your morning as well, even if your day just turns to absolute rubbish. You can be like, "That's cool. I've still done this. I've still done this. Like I've still moved the needle forward."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk about mini retirements and obviously your book in a minute. But let's take a step back and understand like your journey to how you got to reaching FI at the young age of 35. So could you take us back to when you first heard about sort of the FIRE, FI, to get to you sort of early retiring at 35? What was that journey? What was that mindset? What did you do? All of that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, I started really young. I went into a library and I was obsessed with money when I was a kid because we never had a lot of money as a family. So I had little jobs and all sorts of stuff. When I was at high school, I was working like 40 hours a week at Subway, which is madness now that I think about it, but there you are. And so I was just always into it. The first book I ever read on money was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so that was like, the gateway drug as it is for most people.
Me as well, yeah.
Here we go, exactly, yeah. And so I was constantly aware of it. And then sort of when I joined the army, I bought my first rental property, and that kind of sort of got me going. And then I sold that rental property. I bought a bigger house by the beach and all these sorts of things. And then that did quite well. And then again, I was just sort of reading more about it. I wasn't properly into the FIRE element while I was living in New Zealand. And then I took a job in Australia in 2019. And that's when I'd sold the house, and then I had a bit of capital that had been generated from the house. And my best friend, love him to bits, and I owe him so much. But before I moved, I think it was in early 2019, he started talking to me about this magic internet money, this crypto stuff. And I was like, I wasn't really interested in it, but he was so insistent on it. He 100% believed in this magic, invisible internet money. And so at one stage I gave him some money. It was like a couple of $1,000, or I think it might have even been smaller than that. It started off at like $400, and then I gave him some more a little bit later on. But I was like, take this money and just never talk to me about this again. And so I gave him some money. And then a few months later, he's like, hey, you remember that like $2,000 that you gave me? I know we're not supposed to talk about it, but it's now like $24,000. Do you want to have a talk about it now? And I was like, okay, now you have my undivided attention. And so it was, again, I'd sort of moved to Australia. I'd sold my house, and then there was a bit of a scare in Australia where I'd moved some of this capital over to Australia. And because the New Zealand government had gone through their little what was required in terms of tax and what wasn't, I had a pot of capital that wasn't taxable in New Zealand, and I was bringing it to Australia. And I went into HR block. So I owe my entire FIRE journey to the smartness of my best friend and the stupidness of HR block. And these two forces combined to create my FIRE possibility. So I went in there and basically said, I have to do a tax return. And they said, well, that little pot of money that you've got there is taxable here in Australia. And I was like, you're joking. No, it's not. Surely it's not. And they said, yes. And I said, okay, right. I went and got a second opinion. Turns out it wasn't taxable. But that was enough to scare me in terms of, right, I need to do something with this money.
How do I get out of this?
Exactly. So I ended up putting six figures, around $200,000, into an altcoin that my friend was raving about.
Is that US dollars? roughly?
That was Australian dollars. That was Australian dollars.
Okay, got it.
At the time, that coin was 50. It's like 55 cents Australian, something along those lines. And so my plan was, one, get this money away so that they can't tax it. But then the second element of this was, I'll leave it there for a little while until I either decide I'm going to stay in Australia and buy a house with it, or whatever the go was. And then, of course, COVID happened, and then the crypto market just started going crazy. And so I saw it hit like $1, $2, $3, $4, and I'm kind of like losing my mind here. And so I went to my accountant, the good accountant, not HR Block, the rubbish ones, and I said, hey, if I sell any of this crypto, what's the sort of go there? And because I was working for a bank, I was a senior consultant there in the security space, and I was earning relatively good money, but I was on a really high tax rate. And so the accountant was like, if you sell any of this crypto, you are going to lose 40% or 40-something percent in it. And I was like,
ouch.
That's madness. Like, why would I'd be better off just selling, not working, and just selling some of this. Anyway, so I did a little bit of maths, and then I saw a few articles from the Nomad Capitalist. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, Andrew Henderson. And he started talking about Panama and how territorial tax countries worked, and how you could live there and pay no tax as long as your money just came from outside of that place. And so I started investigating this, and it was at that point where I'd been in this job for I think a little bit over a year, and the management team and everything like that was there, but my heart wasn't really in it. And then crypto, and then COVID happened, and everybody was locked down, and everybody was getting sad, and I thought, I don't work anymore, and I moved to one of these territorial tax countries that the Nomad Capitalist is talking about, then I probably don't need to work anymore. And it's just kind of like worked out on the back of my napkin what it was currently sitting at, and what I would need to live. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I did. I had to get out of the New Zealand tax net because I was still just in that, and then I had to get out of the Australian tax net, and then once that was done, then I could start selling some of the crypto and sort of funding my life. And that's kind of what got me to FIRE. But I think what has kept me, because if you followed the crypto sort of news over the last few years, it's sort of dropped down and bottomed out and all this stuff. But what really kept me in the FIRE lifestyle, I guess, was I did a guided tour one day during COVID with one other person, because it was COVID time, in Slovakia, and he was an options trader. And after our tour had finished, we ended up having lunch. What do you do? What do you do? How does that work? And the following day, we had a few beers, sat down, and literally with napkins and a pencil from the waiter, he explained to me how covered calls worked and how selling puts worked. And so that was kind of a bit of an inflection point for me, because like crypto was starting to come down, and I wanted to go from more of a speculative income stream to sort of more regular income. And so, yeah, it was in and around that time I just decided, okay, I'm going to learn more about this covered call, cash secured put type thing. And if I can generate regular income with it, then I'm going to move money from the crypto portfolio, and I'm going to create a shares portfolio or a stock portfolio. And so I spent the next 3 months while I was hiking around researching that. And then when I got back to Panama, I set it up, and I just moved lots of about 50,000 US each month to a share portfolio, and just started trading covered calls on it. So that's kind of what's happened. So I've since then almost completely transitioned. I've still got some Bitcoin and stuff like that, but almost completely transitioned over into the shares or stock market now for things like options trading. So that's kind of how the FIRE journey started, and now kind of working out.
Wait, just really quickly, I have no idea about options trading and all of that. So I've heard of it, But what is it in a nutshell for those like me that has no idea what it is?
Yeah. No, that's okay. This is a really good test, actually, because we're in the middle of making a course for it. But so, in essence, if you own 100 shares of Apple, you can essentially write a contract or an option for that with a buyer, which the market provides, and you can set a price. So let's say you purchased your shares for $100. That would be great. But you decide, right, I will sell my shares for $110 at the end of the month if the stock price is above $110. And a buyer says, oh yeah, that's a good idea because I think that the market is going to push the share prices higher. So if I can buy his shares for $110, that's a bargain for me. So you, as the option seller, you will be paid what's called premium. So the buyer will pay you an amount of money per options contract, per 100 shares, for that contract, for the ability to lock in your price at the end of the month because they think it's going to go higher. And that premium is essentially what I live on and consume while my portfolio grows. So I just do that at scale. So I do that with like NVIDIA shares. I do that with MicroStrategy shares. I do that with pharmaceutical shares and things like that. I will sell a number of options, and I'm sort of typically making, at the moment, especially with all the extra volatility, thanks to some political decisions not too far from here, that's pushing the volatility up in the market, and that's pushing premium up. So we're sort of returning about 4% a month, 5% per month on the portfolio. So if you're making, if you've got about $100,000 in the market and you're quite conservative, you'd probably make about sort of $2,000, $2,500 a month. If you want to be a bit riskier, you can make a little bit more. So anybody with about $250,000, still taking a conservative approach to that, could live anywhere in South America, probably in Asia as well, within a few caveats. And if you say had 300,000, you could probably live in most places in Europe as well. Once you start getting above, that sort of thing, it's just all Switzerland money at that point, I would imagine.
Interesting, because obviously most of the sort of the FI sort of community, they love sort of index funds, sort of passive investment. Yeah. Could you consider the options trading? Is that quite an active version? Is there quite more? Obviously, more activity involved. Like, how much time is that per month? Just to give an idea of the effort required.
So I use what I've called the lazy formula because I'm incredibly lazy.
That sounds good already.
Also, I've got a bit of noise out the back. So I will typically use about 10 or 15 minutes a day, Monday to Friday. So what is that? It's about that much time. And what I'll typically do, the market opens at 9:30 in the US, and I will wait till about 10 o'clock, just till the chaos of the opening of the market has sort of subsided. And then from there, I'll spend about 15 minutes looking at my positions and seeing what's going on. And most of the time, it's just reading news, like what has Donald Trump done today? How is that likely to affect the market over the next month? But for me, I will trade, and just coming back to your active, like how active it is, I will typically trade on my portfolio once a month. And what that means is I get one hit of cash most of the time at the start of the month, because that's how I like it. So that means I can pay myself mid-month for whatever I need. And for me, because I'm in the process of moving to Spain, when we do our visa renewals, Spain wants to see that every month on the same day I get paid the same amount of money so that they feel secure. So I just make sure that I get paid before then, and I send the amount of money that they want to see hit my bank account every month on the same day. And that makes them feel comfortable and makes me feel comfortable. So trading once a month, I spend about 10 to 15 minutes a day after about 10 o'clock in the morning US time.
Gotcha.
Just checking it. Yeah. If you wanted to make more and you wanted to be more active, if you wanted to be a day trader, you could. But I'm I'm just incredibly lazy, and there's just no way I would do it with other things that I've got going on. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like a middle ground between the sort of active investing and then your passive. It's like a
For sure.
okay.
Like I know ETF guys that will literally just buy in just dollar cost average, which is absolutely fine. And then what they'll do is after those shares have been sitting in their account for a year, they will sell some of them in order to consume that cash, if that makes sense. And in Australia, after 1 year, the tax on the capital gain is halved. So they're then able to then distribute that through various mechanisms and reduce the tax paid on that even further. And that's awesome, and that's great for them, but they've got to manage things like a trust, and they've got to distribute it, and they've got to do a bunch of other things. And for me, it's too much work. I'm just so incredibly lazy. I'm just better to spend 15 minutes with a cup of tea in my pajamas and read the news and see what's happened and trade once a month. That's where I'm at.
Awesome. When it comes to sort of like what was your FI? We always, your FI stash, your FI number.
Yeah.
What was your goal then when you reached FI? What was your goal that you achieved?
Yeah.
How is it set up, like percentage wise? Like how's your portfolio split type thing?
Got it. Okay, cool. So just in terms of cash and stuff like that, for me, because I'm not fat fire yet, I've got some thoughts on fat fire, because say fat fire in South America could be $60,000, $50,000. You're living incredibly well on $60,000 in South America, almost anywhere in South America. In Asia, the same thing. You're living a very good life in Europe on $60,000, but not an extraordinary life in Europe, for example. So when I came here, my target, especially after I moved from crypto into shares, and whilst I didn't know anything, I just kept reminding myself, I don't know anything. I'll be happy if I can make, say, $50,000 or $60,000 US a year. That means I can hike and I can do all the things that I want to, and I've got no big financial responsibilities or any of that sort of stuff. And so very quickly achieved that. And so now I'm sort of up towards the $70,000 a year. That's where I'm at. But what I am aware of is that I need to keep growing the portfolio, because we have political decisions that are well outside of my control that have huge impacts on entire economies. And so what I am conscious is Spain needs me to show X in my bank account, which leaves me with Y surplus to reinvest to increase, Z, the overall income, I guess, which I don't know, is probably some terrible algebra, but that's kind of where we're at. So at the moment we're at 70. I'm aiming to get to more, probably morbid, obese, type 2 diabetes fire.
Oh, wow.
But I also am aware that I have the next 45 years to achieve that. And I'm happy to, especially at the moment, what we've kind of got as a savings target. So even though I've hit fire and I don't have to work if I don't want to or any of that sort of good stuff, I still I'm not sure if it's an ingrained habit or it's just the fact that I still have this goal that I want to hit, in terms of at least 100,000, but preferably 150,000 US dollars a year from the portfolio. So it just means that I'm sort of typically aiming to reinvest sort of anywhere between 25 and 45% of my monthly income from options. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a bit less. We're going to New Zealand next month. I'm not sure if you're aware, but it's basically a mortgage payment to have avocado on toast in New Zealand. So we're going to put a little bit of extra money to the travel fund since COVID. So that's kind of where that's at. But typically aim for about 25 to 45% of a savings rate. And by that, I'm not putting money into the bank to save. It's being reinvested into sort of more stocks that I can then use options on. So that's kind of where that's at. And I just want to talk briefly about ETFs, because all the power to people that are just going to DCA and set and forget. That's absolutely wonderful, and mathematically, Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. You're gold. Do you know what I mean? But people can also trade options on a diversified, broad spectrum ETF like VTI, VOO, SPY. You can do all manner of things with this. And one of the most highly traded stocks in the world is SPY. So things like VTI might return ballpark 9-10% per year. But if you run options, if you trade calls on options on your VTI, you might be able to eke out another 10 to 12%. Just depends on how aggressive you want to be with it. So again, an amazing mechanism with a really good return. You can get more. You have to take more risk with it. But because it's low risk by its nature, squeezing out another 10% on something that's so well diversified and so with so much volume, it means you can trade it really easily. If you can eke out another 10%, and it's game changer for people. But I digress.
That's really interesting. And I suppose it's not something, well, from what I see anyway, not something that's talked about as much, because as you said, most of the communities sort of ETF set it and forget it. But what you're talking about is there's an extra layer that you can do, slightly adding a little bit more risk, but there's a possibility, and it's obviously your evidence that it works, because I'm assuming you're doing it yourself. So,
it's literally what pays for my life. So I don't have to go and eat my portfolio. I don't have to consume my portfolio, because every month it spits out 3.5% or 4% or something like that, and then I can just now. Granted, the way that I've committed to this life and structured this life means that I'm a tax resident in a territorial tax country, which is Panama, and I'm earning from one place, which means Panama doesn't tax the income. So anybody, say in Australia, in the US, and in anywhere else, if they are investing and they are living in a country that isn't structured like that, then there's obviously going to be the taxation implications of that. There might be foreign exchange, sort of risks and things like that as well that you need to keep aware of. But anybody can do what I have talked about. You just have to commit to moving to another country, moving your whole life there, and putting up with the good bits and the bad bits that come with that. But anybody could do this. I would argue that somebody living in Sydney, Australia, with a freehold house, if they educated themselves about options trading, for example, could sell that house, I would argue, anywhere in Australia, in Sydney, move to a tax-free country, Malaysia, Georgia, Panama, somewhere like this, and they could do exactly what I've done, and they could do it, relatively quickly. It just comes down, and I'm writing another book already about this. It literally comes down to the blockers that people mentally put up. Like, I would do this, but insert excuse here. That's literally all it is.
Yeah. And that might be a whole different episode in itself. Actually, that's a massive topic. Actually, that's really interesting, Andy. Just touching on sort of the geoarbitrage bit really quickly. And so you coming from New Zealand, and then you obviously you moved to Australia, then you started working there, and then you figured out about options and crypto, and then COVID, and then that kind of what you said before was the tax issues kind of forced you to be like, okay, where can I go to sort of help me out here a bit? And that kind of forced you to look around, and as you said, you got inspired by Nomad Capitalist, and that got you into sort of Panama and things like that. So people that's not sure about geoarbitrage, or they're thinking about it, what would you say are the pros and cons of living in Panama? What are the benefits, and what are the challenges for someone sort of doing the geoarbitrage life?
So, for sure. Let's start with the cons. The cons are you're going to be away from your family. You're going to be away depending on where you grew up, you're going to be away from the societies and the structures, the languages, the services that you've grown accustomed to. There'll be, if you're living in a place like Panama, for example, there'll be none of this just popping down to the bank with your ID and some form of a utility bill to open a bank account. Like, that is a half-day activity. 10 minutes at ANZ in New Zealand, or half a day standing in a bank office in Panama. So little things like that, infrastructure is going to be different. If you don't have a good grasp of the language, especially when you're setting up in a new place, there's going to be some challenges there. So you've just got to be mentally prepared for that sort of stuff. And for me, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I am Casper the Ghost. So moving from cloudy Wellington in New Zealand, which gets a couple of good days a year of good sun, and moving to Panama, where it's 40 degrees with 90% humidity and all-day sun, was an epic challenge for me. Like, air conditioning or I would die. Get dressed up for a date, put a nice shirt on, walk outside sweating immediately. So little things like that can absolutely grind you down. And you've got things like traffic and all of that sort of stuff. And just these little things, they can be quite tiring, especially when you first get there. So it's that lifestyle things. And I would say that it's just learning how things work is probably the biggest thing. You want to receive post. Okay, cool. Panama doesn't have an operating postal service. You need to get, something FedExed to you or DHL to you, because there's no local postie bringing you, letters and stuff like that, which can make logistics a little bit hard. So just getting used to how things work in the new place that you're going to go. Now, that being said, all of the cons, and there must be lots of them, because otherwise I wouldn't still be doing this 4 years later, the tax implications have obviously been huge. And the way I talk about this when I give talks to people and we do some coaching stuff and things like that is, imagine you could move to a place where your quality of living was higher and the government wasn't applying a 40% handbrake to your income. Imagine if you were earning money from your assets and no one was dipping into your pocket every single time you got a check and taking that 40%. How much quicker could you accumulate assets? How much quicker could you meet your next sort of accumulation target? Or how many more trips a year? How does that affect your lifestyle? How many times could you go out a week if that 40% wasn't being clipped every single time? So tax implications can't be overstated when you commit to sort of, moving to steal Andrew Henderson's words, move where you're treated best. Other sort of significant bonuses from geoarbitrage is just you being able to live a higher quality life for a lot lower price. We are here in Medellin, Colombia at the moment. We went out to a restaurant that is top 50 in, I think it's Latin America. I could be wrong on that. The food was incredible, like just mind-blowingly good. And there was 5 of us, and it cost us, I think it was $90 a person, mind you. And again, that's the very top of the restaurant food chain. But to give you some context for that, we have a bunch of really good steak places just down the road from us. Cost us the equivalent of $8 US each to go and get steak and salad and fries and a drink and a starter soup. So you waddle out of the restaurant with your pregnant food stomach for $8 whole, and you could do that every day if you wanted to. So this is what I sort of comes back to in terms of you could eat really cheaply here and save an offensive amount of money, or you could just live a little bit more expensively and live incredibly well. We went to the movies the other day. It cost us $10 for both tickets, and then it was a few dollars more for the popcorn and for the drinks. So again, just being able to ramp up your lifestyle or ramp it down. in terms of cost and things like that. The other thing that I think is incredible about geoarbitrage myself is that after you've sort of traveled around a few places, you are literally able to dictate the cost, what I call your personal burn rate. So if in Australia, for example, or the Philippines or the US or whatever it is, once you take into account all of your expenses and you break it down over a month, let's say you are spending $100 or $150 a day. So that's your food, your insurances, your mortgage, all divvied out. Here, if you want to, if you're on a fixed income, if you're a superannuitant, if you're a digital nomad, whatever the case may be, on a fixed salary, you can dial up your cost or dial it down. If you want to live it up a little bit, you might go to Panama City, have some really, really good food, but it's a little bit more expensive. If you're saving for something in particular 6 months down the track, well, just come here to Medellin for 3 months. You'll save stacks of money. If you want to save lots more money, move to Buenos Aires, go there for 3 months. Drop your costs down even further. Go to Turkey if you want to do those sorts of things. So you've got this flexibility where you can move around and you can adjust the quality of your life and the cost of your life according to what you want. And because you're able to control that, and there's no tax element, there's no as long as you're smart. I'm not saying this is a sort of set and forget thing. You do need to keep tax absolutely in your mindset, and you need to maintain a tax residency. But as long as you're not staying in another country for longer than 6 months of the year and doing a few other little bits and pieces, you can essentially enjoy another country's cost of living, experiences, way of life, public sort of life, and then go back somewhere cheap or somewhere more expensive. Just entirely depends on how you want to do it. So freedom, taxation, and the ability to have an incredibly high quality of life at a very, very low price, and then use that delta to accumulate more money, which then jacks up the quality of your life again. It's another one of those sort of self-fulfilling prophecy type things, or self-feeding systems. It's really cool. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, me too. And it's definitely one thing, like a lever you could pull on your journey, a massive lever you could pull to help you along your journey. And actually, this podcast is about the freedoms that you can get before reaching FI. And geoarbitrage is one of those things that you can do, and as you said, enjoy your life while also on your journey, because you're spending less and you're able to invest more. And then the other thing that you could do, which we're going to talk about, is mini retirements. That's another thing that you can do to enjoy your life before reaching FI. Obviously, you've written a book about mini retirements. Andy, I'd love to understand, why did you write the book? And maybe before we jump into it, give us a bit of an introduction about it.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a funny story, to be fair, and it kind of gives you one of those Panama stories, really. So the book is called The Ultimate Mini Retirement Guide. And basically what happened is we got locked out of our apartment one day, and we had to, if we didn't want to die because of the heat, my girlfriend is completely fine. She's a Panamanian, she's used to it, it's fine. But I was going to melt and die. So she took me to a cafe with some good air conditioning. We had some coffee. And I just finished speaking to somebody about geoarbitrage and how it worked. And they were really tentative. I'd love to, and it sounds amazing, and this is brilliant, and this is the country I want to go to, but one, I don't know how to do it, and B, I don't know if I really want to commit to moving and doing all this sort of stuff. And I was like, well, why don't you just give it a go? Commit to a year or 6 months and give it a go. And so she just asked me all these questions of how she could do it. And then after I'd finished the call with her, I sat down with my girlfriend. I was like, I don't know if I should write a little explainer on how to do this stuff. And then I think it was, because this is only a little mini book, right? And then I think about 6,000 words later or something like that, I banged out most of it in about 2 days, because it was just, what would I do then? What did I do here? What did I do here? It was chucking some experiences and stuff like this. So that was the sort of the emphasis for it and what really created it. And the more that I sort of got into it, and then a couple of months later, because you've got the whole editing process, and you've got to get images, and you've got to do all this stuff to write a book. But a couple of months later, and I was starting to read that Gen Zs were giving up on the idea of an actual retirement because housing's already so expensive that they're struggling to even get into a house, let alone thinking about, me needing to put $1 million or $2 million into ETFs before I can retire. So a lot of these articles I was reading were how the younger generation were going, this is already out of my reach, I can't do it. So rather than have one big retirement, at the end of life, they're doing these little mini ones, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is perfect. This is marrying up perfectly to the little book that I'm in the process of writing. So that was really, I'm not really a big airy fairy person, but that was almost like the universe saying, yep, this book is needed. So that's the kind of aligned. Yeah.
The book's kind of split up into sort of 12 months from departure to, and then 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, and then it goes through sort of like your 3 months during, once you've arrived and wherever you're at. Yeah. Could you talk us through just, tips in those sort of segments? So let's say someone's in, I don't know, just say you've got someone's in Australia or US, I don't know, their early 30s, they're thinking about geoarbitrage, a mini retirement, like using your book as kind of like a framework. What are some tips you could give them if they're thinking about it?
So the first thing that I would say to somebody, especially if they're in Australia, and because most of the people from Australia that I speak to, they're like, I've been to Bali about 5 times and I really like it. So I'm thinking about, or Thailand. So I'm thinking I might want to do a mini retirement in Southeast Asia. And so, that's awesome because I get some people that reach out to me and they're like, I have no idea where I want to go. So when people come to me and they're like, I'm thinking Southeast Asia, I'm thinking Thailand. So that's brilliant. And so then one of the sort of key elements that I really, really like in the book is just going through and doing that initial foundational research. So for me, for example, weather. If it's too hot, I'm going to die. And if I'm away for a year on a mini retirement where I'm supposed to be enjoying myself, I'm probably going to hate it. So doing things like that and doing that little self-assessment, what is the cost of living there? And we've got a whole bunch of resources in here. We've got things like, we link to Numio, which is a crowdsourced data set where people can refer to for things like costs of living in different cities all around the world. You've got things like the Nomad List, which is where digital nomads are able to log in and research countries that they're going to for things that are important to them, like safety and weather and internet connectivity. So those are really good resources as well that people can use when they're looking at their mini retirement. If you've got any healthcare requirements, then you're able to do those sorts of things. So getting a really good foundational sort of location build up in your mind of where you want to go is really, really important because it makes all the steps that follow on later on so much easier. If you know you're going to be going to a Spanish-speaking country 12 months beforehand, okay, cool. It's a good opportunity for you to start learning some words because if you're going to be there for a year and you want to try and integrate, if you want to try and to be able to, make your life easier, you need to know some of the language. So 6 months out, that's really, really important. Find out where you're going. Is it going to, meet your sort of financial requirements? Are you going to be able to afford it? Do they have the things there in that place that you need? The food, the public transport, if you're taking a family, do they have the services for things like family, education, all of that sort of good stuff? So after about that sort of 12 months thing, and you've got a good understanding of where you're kind of going and what you need in order to move there, you start heading into sort of 9 months beforehand, and you really need to start thinking to yourself, and I say the 9 month period, because if you're working for an employer at the moment, in this particular phase. If you aren't working remotely with them already and you want to continue working, even if it's a part-time whilst you're away, then you need to start building a relationship of trust with that employer where you can be out of the office again for a couple of days of the week, but your productivity doesn't drop or even goes up, which would be ideal, and slowly start building that relationship. Because some people I have that come to me, they're like, I've got a really good employer and I'm not 100% convinced that I'm going to love it in X country, so I don't really want to give up my job. How do we have that conversation with the boss that means he's going to let me move to the other side of the world without firing me? So that's really, really important. Start working on that stuff. And then we start getting to the 6 months beforehand. Start thinking to yourself, like, if you own your own house, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to rent it out? Am I going to leave it vacant? What am I going to do with all my stuff? Am I going to downsize, which is what we talk about in the book as well, like, how to give it away, how to, recycle it. If you need to, then trash it, just to try and be, responsible people. And if there's any doubts in your mind, take it, put it in some storage, leave it till you come back. What do you do with your car? You're going to store your car for a year, or do you give it to your dad so he can run around to, bowls on a Sunday in it and just sort of keep it turning over? Those sorts of little things that people don't think about. And again, at the sort of 6 month mark, if you are planning to go to a country that doesn't speak your language, you really need to start ramping up that language. So making sure you're hitting the apps. So we've got in here like Duolingo or whatever it is, but then practice with it. So we've got some examples of some platforms that people can join up. italki is the platform, and that's where you can hire a tutor and you can go down a proper formal learning path, or you can literally hire them to sit there and talk to you in Italian backwards and forwards, or Spanish, or whatever it is that you want to learn, so you can actually take that vocabulary that you learnt in Duolingo and you can take it for a walk and see how it sounds. Do they understand you when you order a coffee from your Duolingo Spanish with a Spanish-speaking person? So those are the sorts of things that we look at there. You start looking at visas and stuff. If you're going to go to one place for longer than 3 to 6 months, you're probably going to need a visa. And then how does that work with your passport? If you're going from New Zealand or Australia, previously it would have been the UK, relatively easy to get around and not too many visa requirements, because we've got really relatively good passports and stuff like that. But the world's always changing, and, countries with various dynamics, politicians and stuff like that, they change things. So it's really important you start doing that, because sometimes countries have a 2 to 3 month process for their visa. We've just got the Spanish retirement visa, and that was supposed to take 90 days. We allowed for 90 days because that's what the Spanish embassy said. We ended up getting it in 23 days, but you need to make sure that you've got that window so that if that doesn't work out, that you can appeal or you can adjust for that so that you can go to that place that you want to. And if you still can't, then you need time to then go and fill another application and for another place that you can go to. So there's lots of that sort of stuff. You also have stuff in here in this space where you need to start looking ahead to where you're going and getting into really nitty-gritty details. And what I mean by that is, if you are going to move to Valencia in Spain, which is where I'm going, for example, here, you need to find out what is going on there in terms of apartments. Because if you're going to get a visa, then you need to have a local ID. In order to get a local ID, you need to have a rental contract. And in order to get a rental contract, you need to pay a largish deposit of about 3 months so that the landlord feels safe renting to a foreigner. So all of these things flow on from each other. This will all come up in your research and should. And so we sort of refer people, and we really encourage people in the book to reach out to the local Facebook groups full of expats who have gone through the process that you're looking to do, and find out, this is what the website says, how does it actually work? how do we actually do this thing? So those are really, really good 6 and 3 months out. And then obviously, depending on how you've gone about sort of, packing up your life, all that sort of good stuff. If you've got children, you need to start thinking sort of a month or so beforehand. Really, now I'm blessed and I don't have children. But so that means I can do things like sleep in and all that sort of good stuff. But if you're going to be moving, then you obviously need to keep them uppermost in your mind, right down to the nitty gritty details. If you're heading to Europe from Australia, that's a big flight. Let's make sure that Dora the Explorer is downloaded onto the iPad, and all of those sorts of things to make your life a little bit easier. What's the schooling situation like there? Is there kindy equivalents or what sort of documents do we need to provide to the school in advance in order to get them enrolled so that we're not disrupting, the kids and things like that. So that stuff is super important for when you get there. And then we go through just again, sort of real common sense stuff, but we talk about how... when I say we, this is some sort of multiple personality thing, me in the book. But, booking an Airbnb, for example, for a month while you look for an apartment. And if you still haven't, then you're able to sort of at least use the relationship that you've built with the Airbnb host to negotiate down your price for extending. Take them off the platform. So, you book for a month, you don't break anything or set the house on fire, you pay your bill on time and you don't cause any damage, all that sort of good stuff. And then you reach out to your Airbnb host if you haven't found an apartment already and leverage that relationship to take the next month off Airbnb, and straight away, that's already saved the landlord a big chunk of cash, so you can negotiate down your price. From their side, that means they don't have to necessarily, they're not having their rent clipped, but it also means you're a known quantity now because you've already been in their apartment for a month and you haven't burnt it down, so they're maybe more likely to come down. So little tips and tricks like that so you can negotiate things down. And then once you've found your apartment and you've sort of localized yourself, you know where the supermarket is, and you know where the park is, and you know where the bus is if you want to go to the beach or whatever the case may be, you need to start looking at things where's the doctor? Where's the closest doctor for me? How do I get on there? How do I get registered with them? What about a dentist? If you've got any sort of specific health issues, then where do I find one of those specialists? How does that work here? Those sorts of things. And then obviously if you've got family and stuff, you need to build on to that network as well. Is there sports stuff that's going on that we can get our kids into? If you're an adult like me and is there a running club around here? Is there a hiking club or a paragliding? All that sort of good stuff. Those sorts of things that people get into. If you want to really take advantage of a mini retirement, you need to be thinking to yourself, I need to integrate into this community. What local markets are there where I can go and speak to people that are from here and really become part of the environment, of the neighborhood and stuff like that, because it's that feeling of being part of the town or the city or the whatever that is going to maximize the experience that you have. You're not just going to be a tourist living in an Airbnb for 12 months.
Or in a resort.
Exactly.
You don't want to be in a resort bubble. You want to be in amongst the people and going 100%. Where they go, shop where they shop. And that's the beauty of that sort of long sort of travel, isn't it? Yeah.
100%. If you go to the gym and your gym guy, I know we've been here for a month and a bit, but the gym guy and his wife, they know me, and their French bulldog, runs up to me every time we come to the gym because we give them some love and all that sort of stuff. But it's little things like that, just integrating into where you're living, that is going to increase the value of your experience. And it's going to maybe make you think, and this is kind of what we talk about towards the end of the book there, once you've integrated into it, do you want to go back? Or have you done a good job and now all of a sudden... if you didn't need to work beforehand, do you need to go back? And if you already are working, you're still working for the boss, it's working out pretty good so far. You feel at home here now. You know George from the farmers market and the gym people, and you know the local, sort of hairdresser or whatever. It's starting to feel a little bit homely now. So you've managed to lower your cost of living, increase the quality of your living, and you've integrated. You've learned a whole bunch of new things. You might speak another language now. You've got an entirely new social circle. You've got a whole new bank of life experiences that you didn't have before in Australia. All of these sorts of things come as a non-tangible sort of benefit to doing these things. And you've got the whole die with zero. Well, you've got more of a die with zero approach to this, where you are banking life experiences along the way, which is just increasing like the quality of your life. And when you get to that time where you're about to move on to the next life, you're going to be sitting there thinking like, man, I had a great time in Bangkok or Spain or wherever it is that you're going. I'm so glad that I did that. No one's going to be thinking, gosh, I wish I'd worked another 25 years or 10 years in that cubicle that I loved ever so much. Nobody ever says that. So,
yeah, that's it. That's exactly what happened to me back in when I done my first sort of 12-month sabbatical stroke mini retirement. That was in 2017. Part of my trip was to go to Philippines, Manila, which is where I'm from, and the trip was supposed to be like 6 weeks. I ended up staying for 6 months. And then after that, ended up staying for 6 years. So it was like, what happened? And exactly the things that you mentioned, you got integrated, you understood the lay of the land, you got to know people around you, you built a bit of a community. And yeah. So I can attest to that.
It's wonderful. And I'm sure even though you would have had people back, because you came from the UK, right? So you went back to the Philippines, but you were previously living in the UK. So I'm sure there would have been people there that you had missed, or people that, man, we don't catch up anymore because you're living in the Philippines, all that sort of good stuff. But then you go back there, and I experienced this as well. Like after a couple of weeks back in New Zealand, it's like I've never left, because people are just doing the same things. We have those chats, we have those yarns. Then after about 4 weeks, I'm like, cool, I'm ready to go back home now. Like, I've been in New Zealand for 4 weeks. I'm ready to, head back. But again, that's because I've integrated into where I've created another home and those sort of things. So, yeah, fascinating stuff.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing sort of tips in your book. I think that's really helpful for listeners who's interested in taking that time off, and people that might be hesitant about it. So I think your book helps them to reduce that anxiety about it and put some sort of tangible, practical actions in place for them. So yeah, thanks, Andy.
So easy.
Okay. All right, Andy, let's jump into the rapid fire questions.
Let's go.
I've got 4 questions for you. Just answer them really quickly.
Yep.
And I'll jump straight into the first one. The first one is, what's something you wish you'd done 10 years ago?
Retired.
Simple.
So I would have retired an extra 6 years earlier. Yep. Way more life out there, way less work.
Nice. Okay. Question number 2. What are 1 or 2 daily habits that have helped you in your journey?
For sure. Gym and reading Stoic philosophy every single day.
Okay.
So the Daily Stoic. Amazing.
Nice. This one's a bit deep. Number 3, your most important lesson in life.
Your mindset is your reality. If you don't change it, if you don't work on it, you will literally create your own limitations, your own prison. The only thing that is stopping you from doing anything you want is yourself. If you can change your mind, you can change your reality.
Awesome. Nice bit of wisdom there. Thanks, Andy. And then last one is 2 to 3 transformational book recommendations that you could sort of recommend to listeners.
For sure. Okay. Naval Ravikant's The Almanac of Naval Ravikant is incredible, not just for learning how to think about making money, but about happiness. happiness and balance and mindset and looking at what you put effort into to what it brings back to you, I think is just incredible. Next book would be, it was the original version, it's probably a bit old now, but The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. That changed the way I did a whole bunch of stuff. The updated version is even better. And then another book that I would say from a money perspective was the real gateway drug. I mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad before, and that was okay back in the day, but I think his Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, when I first started properly getting into money, was really what lit my fire. He wrote about how you really wanted to be a dairy farmer. And, a farmer raises cattle, sends them off to the works and makes money one time, whereas a dairy farmer milks the cows every single day and makes money every single day. And it was that constant, regular cash flow as what was I back then, probably a 15 or 16-year-old boy, that really got me thinking, like, if I can find something to put my money in, a dairy cow in the investment equivalent that pays me money every single day, then I can spend the rest of my life doing whatever I want. I don't have to do anything that anybody else tells me to do. So those would probably be probably some of the best books. And then also Die with Zero changed the way that I thought about my retirement, about what I was leaving behind, and more importantly about staging activities. Leaving all the, I don't want to say boring stuff, but leaving all of the things that don't require physical activity until you're older, because you can do that stuff. But if you need your knees and your back to climb mountains, then maybe do that in your 30s or your 40s or your 50s when those things still work. So I reckon those 4 books are a fairly good start for anybody.
Yeah, that last one really profound. I've got a quick bonus question here just for the listeners. What would you say are 1 or 2 small things that they can do if they wanted to sort of retire, do what you've done, retire sort of in your 30s and your 40s? What are 1 or 2 small things they can do this week just to get going?
Okay, for sure. I would look at something that you can do. Maybe that's already within your skill wheelhouse, whether it's offering some extra service outside of your 9 to 5 or whatever the case may be, for generating a little bit of extra income and then dedicating that income towards your early retirement, whether you wanted to go down the DCA route, if you wanted to start putting into options trading or buying crypto, whatever the case may be. So using the skills that you have to generate extra cash. And then the second thing that I would say is ramp up your financial education, because financial education is kind of on the pendulum with risk. People see risk where they are uneducated, but as soon as education is like a torch in the dark. If you can build your financial education, you pour light into the shadows, and now all of a sudden that thing isn't so risky anymore because you know more and you can offset that risk. So I think a lot of people stick to the very conservative. They'll do the things that they've always done, or do the things because society says that you should do those things, and anything else is risky. But if you go out and you learn about travel, about other cultures, about investments, about money, about businesses, about whatever, now all of a sudden you shed some light on that area and the risk level drops down, and maybe it's something that you could do. Maybe it's an investment that's going to change your life. But yeah, I would say generate some extra income and financial education so you can employ that income to maximum effect, even if other people are sort of naysayers. There we go.
Love that. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you answering those questions. And yeah, so we come to the end of the show. And Andy, is there any place you'd like to send the listeners? Any sort of plugs?
Please feel free for sure.
to throw them in.
So we've got, there's a few places to be fair. So we've got the Retire with GeoFire Facebook, and I can send you the link and you can check it up in the podcast notes if you like. If you're interested in the book, I mean, I'm not going to say no. Absolutely, jump on Amazon. The Ultimate Mini Retirement Guide. It's got a big yellow cover, and again, I'll send you a link to that. And we've also got the Substack and the website as well. 60secondstofire.com is the website, and 60 Seconds to Fire at Substack, I think is what it is, on the blog. So the blog, I send out fortnightly articles on all things geoarbitrage, early retirement. We've just written up a big article about how a woman needed a medical procedure in Australia. It was going to cost her $27,000. She went to Turkey. $25,000. She went to Turkey. It cost her $7,000 for flights, 5-star accommodation, the same thing. Just mind-blowing when you think about how you can use geoarbitrage. So if you're interested in learning more about that sort of stuff, then go along 60secondstofire.com or jump along to the Substack, and you can sign up to the newsletter. Also, there's a couple of speaking gigs. I'm speaking at a Fat Fire conference in Vietnam next year. That might be very close to being sold out, but if not, you can find out more at the Retire with GeoFire Facebook group. So that will be, that's it. There's lots.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to put all of those links in the show notes. So, Andy, thank you very much. Had a pleasure chatting to you today. It's been a blast. And we'll keep in touch, hopefully.
For sure. All right, mate. Hey, thanks so much for having me, and hopefully all the listeners are still awake.
Absolutely. Cheers, Andy.
Right, cheers. Thanks.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. If you need more help, you can check out our free guides and services on our website, freedombeforefi.com. If you have a burning question or just want to chat, don't hesitate to drop me an email at greg@freedombeforefi.com. If you found the show useful and want to be notified of future episodes, you can click follow on Spotify, Apple, or the app you're currently using right now. If you think the episode will help a friend or a colleague, feel free to share it with them. And lastly, if you learned just one good thing that will help you in your journey and you want to help us out, please do leave a 5-star rating on your podcast player app. That would help us out loads.